for putting man on the moon.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh yeah.
Yep.
What do you think?
Hello. It looks like we're live. All right. Good evening.
Good
And
evening, good evening, and welcome to Couch Conversations with the Doctors, where true health is wealth. Well, it's an interesting Monday night, and tonight we're going to let Dr. Maya Green lead us along our journey to healthiness, along with our Congressman. Dr. Maya Green, take us away.
good evening, everyone. Thank you, Nikki. Good evening to community. We have a lot to talk about. We have everything from the new COVID cases to making sure that we continue the conversation Dr. Mason has started about self love for our community and self love for ourselves, what that means, and how that looks. Continuing that conversation. And then we got a couple of we have a special guest. Well, all of the guests are special, right? But we have a special guest, Mr. Christian, here meeting us tonight. So I'll kick it off and ask Mr. Harrington to go ahead and introduce yourself to community.
I'm Joe Harrington. Last week I was a retired public health and healthcare professional, and this week I'm still a retired healthcare and public health professional. Worked at 3 hospitals, worked for the city and state health department, retired in 2017 from the Illinois Department of Public Health, and where I was regional health officer for Cook County and administrative law judge. And I will describe myself as something I heard a good friend of mine describe himself as: I am a servant leader.
Wonderful. A servant leader. Well, I don't have the fancy introductions that Nikki has, so I know we'll miss those. But what's fancy about Dr. Miller is the ability to offer healing to the community from a physical, in the natural, and talk about spiritual healing with the community. Dr. Miller, take it away.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. My name is Dr. James Miller, and I believe in total health care. If one part is well and the other part is sick, you're still sick. So we believe in holistic healing, and as I retired from practicing internal medicine in 2019. But I am still interested in healing the community, and I've been able to recognize some things that I probably didn't see as well when I was out practicing medicine, trying to keep up with what I thought I need to keep up with that time. But I've learned since then is that we really have to take a new approach to health care, and that approach is to stop searching and start prevention. We really have to start preventing disease processes and doing those things that are going to keep people healthy, other than trying to wait until they get sick or search their sickness down and heal them, because we're not good at that. But we probably would be
Mhm.
better if we try to prevent these diseases from, taking their hold on people.
All right. Talk about prevention. Talk about other ways the community heals. That takes me to um, Dr. Mason. I know I was coming to you when we started talking about do something before the person gets sick. Don't wait. And who has seen the medical industry inside and out from so many different perspectives, and now is offering our community a different perspective, more options for healing. Dr. Mason, take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Green, and I'm always honored to be on with my esteemed colleagues. As Mr. Harrington mentioned ago, have a similar path in terms of our intersections in public health. I never thought I'd be a public health official till I was Commissioner of Health of the City of Chicago, and then following that at the county. But what I've learned in the time of being at the county and in my own practice and in the organizations and associations that I've been in those times, I've learned that health has not a lot to do with what happens in hospitals.
Hmm.
And that we have to really move away from that kind of thinking, because we don't then exercise our minds as much as we should for really dealing with ways to combat the true causes of problems, not just where people work, live, and play, but what I've decided to focus on is what we eat, because that is one of the number one things. And none of the medicines that we do or none of the procedures that we do, and I did, ever cured anybody of anything. It managed it, but it didn't cure it. Now, management's important, But if we really want to get a handle on things, we've got to go to the root cause. And I look at food not just in the physical dimension, but also in the mental and spiritual dimension as well. So I'm excited to hear what we're going to talk about tonight. Thank you.
All right. And then that brings me to Dr. Graham, who talks a lot about autoimmune stuff and always has an interesting way of explaining kind of a process that's going on in the body in the way community can understand. Dr. Graham, take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Maya. I just want to share with you that my career, in many ways, is very similar to Dr. Mason and Dr. Miller. I spent 30 years in the office trying to help people. And then I spent 2 years in Washington, D.C. with a congressman. And that really opened my eyes about healthcare and all the different factors that influence a healthy outcome that took place outside the office. And that's why I'm here. I'm going to try and answer your questions as best I can.
Thank you, Dr. Graham. I definitely want to ask our special guest before I go to the congressman. I want to ask our special guest to introduce yourself, Christian Ikedilobo. Did I say that correctly or no?
It is EKDOB.
EKDOB.
Yes.
Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Maya. And my name is Christian EKDOB. I'm currently an incoming sophomore at the George Washington University. And my major is biochemistry on a pre-med track, but I'm complementing it with a minor in political science. And I'm doing this to further combine my interests in science and policy to promote my service-oriented background.
Woo! Amazing work. Amazing work. I can see how proud our congressman is of you, Congressman Davis. Nikki always talks about the vanguard on healthcare. I can't do it like Nikki can, but I can tell you that the policies and the waves you make, not only so we're on the medical side doing stuff, right? And you're advocating and creating the space for not only us to be able to do what we do and avenues and opening doors for that, but also for the community to heal and creating equality and justice. You know, a lot of times you hear a lot about equity and equality, and now Nikki said, don't forget the fun facts. Okay, fun fact from Dr. Maya 100 is very trendy to talk about equity, right? It's very rare that we see equity in action, and that's what Congressman Davis has given to our community. Congressman Davis.
Well, thank you all so very much, and I feel so delighted and excited to have our special guest with us this early evening. So welcome, Christian. I had such a weekend until I had to pinch myself. I walked the whole Bud Billiken parade, every step, and I had not intended to do that. I had actually intended to sit in the gentleman's car and ride down King Drive. But I got out of the car when it was time to step off, and I felt so good I never got back into the car until at the end of the parade. So it was just a wonderful, wonderful exercise to see the large number of people who were there. And I think it was the most energetic. It was also, I think, the largest Bud Billiken parade that we've had in a long time. People were excited and energetic and walking and talking and just having themselves a good time. So my hats are off to the Chicago Defender charities for continuing the legacy and the tradition. You know, there are so many things in our community that start off with a bang and somewhere along the way they falter. I can recall when the Afro Patrolmen's League was a ongoing, serious bunch of law enforcement people, Black, I know that Renault Robinson died a few days ago, and somehow the Afro Patrolmen's League is not quite what it used to be. I'm saying I know churches that when founders were still the pastors, they were mega churches and had lots of things going. And some of those are not quite the institutions that they used to be. I can recall when some of the major civil rights groups had thousands of members. They don't have those members now for whatever the reasons are. But the Billiken Parade just kind of showed out. And I was very thrilled. I thought of Miss Marjorie Stewart Joyner, and I thought of the Sinstack family and what they put into that to make it happen, and to see that it was ongoing just kind of warmed my heart. And then yesterday, I called it my International Day because I apologized to the young people who were having their youth conference at the Swiss Hotel that I missed because it was at the same time as a church that I had agreed to attend to celebrate their 21st year anniversary. And it was located at 4750 North Sheridan. And of course, it's an African immigrant church. And I just had a wonderful time. The church was filled. There was not an empty seat in the place. They had a little space for children, for them to be there, and people had brought their children. I left there and went to the Pakistani parade and rode on the float with a group of Pakistani children. That parade was just wonderful, Western and TUI. So I call that part of my international stuff. Then I came back to the south side of Chicago to a meeting on 65th and Cottage Grove. Left there and went to Elmhurst to celebrate the Association of Indian Organizations annual meeting where they were giving awards to people. And I just felt kind of good, especially when I turned on the radio this morning and heard where one of the well-known entertainers had made a comment about being called black. Well, not black, but African American. And he said he had some whatever with all of that. But thanks to everybody for being here. Thanks for a wonderful Monday. And I am as thrilled and delighted as I can be to have another shot at listening to such an esteemed group of men and women as you. So please go right ahead. And it's a pleasure, Dr. Maya.
Thank you so much, Congressman. Well, for those of you, like, who doesn't know about Bud Billiken Parade, but just a little background, underscoring what the Congressman was saying. The Bud Billiken Parade was started in 1929 in reflection of a character that was created in 1923 by Robert S. Abbott, who was the founder and publisher of the Chicago Defender. And the Bud Billiken columns used to have authors and youth advice column. And so they created this character, Bud Billiken. You write in or you write as Bud Billiken from 1923 to 1929. They said we should just have a whole parade about it, because part of the advice was to celebrate being young, to celebrate education, and to celebrate general African American life. And that's what the Bud Billiken Day Parade does now. It is the second largest parade of celebration as for African Americans in the U.S., and it is spectacular. I remember as a youth, my first time dancing or marching in the parade. Me and my friends formed a little dance group, and we would go. And it's such a good time because our community likes to be around each other. Our community feeds off of each other, and we do great things together. So if you missed it this year, don't miss it next year. Bud Billiken Day Parade. Shout out to my niece, JL, who was the crown princess this year. Shout out. Okay. TC Maya loves you. Now, moving on. I want to talk about this new variant, this COVID variant. Some of you have seen an increase in hospitalizations, an increase in diagnosis, and what we generally call a spike. A spike is when we're moving along at a certain area. Like we may have 5 people today, 5 people tomorrow, 5 people, and then we got 10 people, and then we got 100 people. It spikes up the level or number of people that are impacted by COVID. So we're recently having a spike in COVID. And so this is an opportunity for us to touch base. Remember what we learned before. We can talk about the mask. We can talk about kind of what's going on. But I'd like to hear from our esteemed colleagues today. Any interesting facts you'd like to mention about COVID, advice you want to give at the start? Let's just act how I say, let's give advice at the door. What are we going to do for our tribe and our communities to protect ourselves? Now is the time to start thinking about it and putting some action into place. All right. So I'll give space right now.
So, Nikki, I've got a couple thoughts. And Dr. Tony, a couple Mondays ago, was talking about some of the problems with vaccination. So I went back up and I re-looked at that. I looked at the history of it. And to me, it was really interesting because if you look under side effects, virtually all the articles say that there are no long-lasting side effects. However, if you go into complications, you'll find that there are 3 groups of complications that can be long-lasting. However, every article concluded that the side effects or complications are not so significant. They don't occur so frequently that it's too risky to take the vaccine. They encourage taking the vaccine and accepting the risks rather than the other way around. So I hope I stated that so it's clear to everybody.
I think you did, Doug.
Okay.
I mean, the message is as the message was, that we still, that's the only real thing that we have. And I think also we have to, and I'll leave it to my internal medicine colleagues on the panel, but certainly we need to look at those of us with underlying conditions that perhaps put themselves at a little higher risk, and really needed to make sure that we give advice on the best way to mitigate the risk factors we may have, and also remember that those were diabetic and what have you. So I'll leave that to my internal medicine colleagues to comment on.
Yeah, I think we learned a lot during the years that we went through the pandemic in terms of who got sick and the kinds of issues that people had to deal with. And so I think that, hopefully this time, as we begin to see a spike, hopefully these spikes are not going to put us back into those large numbers of morbidities and mortalities that we dealt with before. But also hopefully that our community will be a lot wiser in terms of protecting ourselves from this virus. This virus just doesn't play. It's for real. And I know people want to say that it's not that COVID is gone, but it's not gone. It's still here. It's still mutating, and it does what viruses do, which is to try to survive. And it needs you in order to survive. So please don't make yourself so available to it. And that's how we get rid of it. And also do those things that help to keep it from surviving in us. I think that's the key.
Yeah, I want to jump in if I can and start with something that was talked about early on in 2019 when we were beginning to deal with COVID before there was a shutdown, before things really got serious. That we talked a lot about herd immunity, but we missed the opportunity to achieve herd immunity. Had we received or achieved what they call herd immunity, it would be less of a threat now than it is moving forward. And according to the CDC, this is recent data, there's a new COVID variant called EG5. And I'm not a doctor, so I won't get into that, but it's part of the Omicron family. It now makes up 17% of all the cases in the US. And so that's what they're concerned about. There's this new variant that's out there. But it's important to remember that while we've gotten some degree of control over COVID, COVID still exists. COVID has not gone anywhere. It's mutated, it's changed, but it hasn't gone anywhere. So whatever the recommendations were in the past are still the recommendations for right now. It's appropriate for people that are immune compromised and over 65 with some health risk. It may be appropriate for them to start wearing masks again in certain situations. We know that vaccines work. Well, most of us believe the max, because some people don't believe. Most of us know, many of us know that vaccines work. And while some people don't believe, vaccines do work. And there is a vaccine for COVID, and they're probably going to develop some different type of shot moving forward. The one thing that's really concerning is as we move from summer to fall, we're going to move into flu and pneumonia season. So not only will we be dealing with COVID, we'll be dealing with the flu and we'll be dealing with pneumonia. And there are vaccines for flu and pneumonia, and people don't get those shots either. So the concern is that there will be a serious uptick in respiratory illnesses that could be avoidable if people do the things that we were telling them to do at the peak of COVID. Now that things have gotten better, we may have to go back to some of the remediation efforts that people didn't like by sheltering in place, but we may be able to avoid that if we take what I would think, and my colleagues might agree, are some common sense measures. That if you're at risk, you may need to be wearing masks now and consider wearing a mask when you're out in public. And Dr. Meyer will probably lead us in an exercise to wash our hands after this. And one of the things that I have started doing is whenever I come back in the house, if I've been out, even if I go out to the garage and come back, I wash my hands. I wash my hands every time I leave the house and I come back in because I know at some point I'm going to touch my face, and if I touch something where a virus has been and I touch my nose or my mouth, it's likely that I will get that virus. So what we're talking about are some important common sense measures, and we can avoid going back to some of the dreadful days of COVID, which have changed us as a people. And I'm just talking about Black people, as a people inexorably. You know, and I won't get into some of the ways it's changed us, but it's changed us in some bad ways. Now we picked up some bad habits as well.
Well, I guess I would ask
ahead.
the question without the crisis environment. I mean, things have relaxed. Does it appear that people are going to heed the warnings? You know, like heed the beat of the distant drum. And I know that our authorities are telling us that we need to watch out and be careful and make use of the information that we have gotten. Does it appear that people are really listening to that and are really buying into it? I mean, there's no public determinations of anything, saying that you got to wear the mask, you got to do this, you must do that. And so I just wonder if people are going to use the preventive measures that we've learned in the last 2, 3 years.
Well, Congressman, I hear what you're asking. And the only thing that I can say is I certainly pray and hope so that we will believe that this is real. But I'd also think that one of the things that I've learned since I've sort of taken a step back from the clinical practice of medicine and looking at things far more in a holistic way, that we need to also remind people that are diabetic that we know the people that got sick and had a lot of bad problems, and my internal medicine colleagues probably know this better. But we need to make certain that those of us who do have chronic conditions like diabetes or some in, other kinds of diseases or cancers where we may be taking medications and on different types of therapy, we need to make sure that we've optimized our health there too, because COVID doesn't discriminate, and if it finds a willing host where it can set up shop and begin to replicate itself, it will do that. And the only way that you can avoid this is that you've got to keep your house in as good an order as possible, to help your body fight it off. I mean, we see analogs of this in nature, and we just saw some horrific ones that just happened in Hawaii. And it just goes to show you can have very strong buildings that were built, and you could have all kinds of things that happen that were there. But if you look at, if we allow if we are unable, as we were with the firestorms and the wind things that happened in Hawaii, and I look at it analogously when we look at the foods that we're eating and the inflammatory setups that we're creating inside our own bodies, which make us more vulnerable to these kinds of storms, whether you call them COVID or whatever you call them. So I just pray that we will learn from this and continue to maintain our best defense. Our best offense is a good defense. And obviously the vaccines help, but we also need to make certain that we're taking care and optimizing our health. Those of us who may have diabetes or other things, we need to make certain that we're making sure that those things are as under good a control as possible, and that we get our rest, that we eat well, and we drink our water that would like we should, and make sure that our desire, whatever underlying diseases we have, that we have optimized those as best as we possibly can and keep it there.
Just
Well,
looking at human nature and looking at what has been happening this year with people, this is the first time that people have really kind of returned to normalcy, and I think that that's going to be a difficult thing to move out of that back into the mode that we really need to be in, which is the protective mode and the mode of caring for ourselves and for each other. Because once, as I said, once the bird get out of the coop, it's difficult to get him back in. But just, people enjoy life now. They're enjoying life in a normal kind of way, and it's hard for people to give that up without without some rules or some kind of external pressure on them to do so. And so I think that we need the individuals that are in charge of things need to keep a close eye, and I think that we need to make certain that that the alarm go on quickly, not late, in terms of what need to be done so that people will respond quicker, as opposed to trying to hope that it's going to pass them by. That's one thing. The other thing is that as we look at who's at biggest risk and who can carry the disease without necessarily having as much as adverse condition, which is younger people don't have as much of a problem as older people. And so, and again, being the social being that we are, younger people tend to be more social, more interactive with one another. and so we have to be careful that we sort of make certain that those partitions are not remain in place. That we go visit grandma not when we uh, possibly have something that we're carrying that may be something that could lead to her death, but that we are careful to not infect those people that are at high risk. So we have to take some responsibility for our activity, our behavior, and our interaction with one another. I think that's going to be a hard thing to for people to just turn on and do, but I think it's necessary that the whistles get blown early as opposed to later.
Yeah, I want to offer up a nuanced answer to Congressman Davis's question. What I know from experience is some people will and some people won't.
Mhm.
The hope is most people will and very few people won't. But it's just the nature of people. Some people, no matter what you say, no matter what you ask, are going to do what they believe, not based upon fact, what they believe is in their best interest. And that's one of the concerns we have. I remember during the peak of COVID, one of the things they talked about a lot were trusted advisors, people that the community trusts. And I would imagine that each of us feels that the community should be able to trust us. But I've talked to a lot of people, and it's been hard to convince some of them about what is the right thing and the right approach. I'm going to use myself as an example and give an example when I was a child because my mother said this many times to me. She said, "You know, boy, you don't have enough sense to come in out of the rain." you know. And when I was young, if I was out and I was playing, I wasn't coming back in the house because I didn't know when I would get back out of the house a second time. I was going to go out, I was going to stay out, I was going to have a good time. I was young, I could bounce back. A good friend of mine, Tim Black, who died a couple of years ago, one of the things you said, he died at 102. And he tells a story that when he was a young man, when he fell down, he bounced. He said, but now if I fall down, I break. So it's a different thing as you get older. So there's certain things you need to be cognizant of, and age is one of those things. So my hope would be is based upon the experience we've had, and even though people don't want to go back to that, I'm hoping that that will be enough to get people to say, well, I think this time I'm going to do the vaccine. I'm going to do what they're telling me to do than we've had before. Because we could go back to those days where the schools are shut down, where people are not, they don't want people to go to work. I mean, we could go back to that and we could go back to that very easily. But in my heart of hearts, I know that some people will and some people won't. I'm just hoping that a lot of people listen to us and decide to take the appropriate action.
I don't want to shift this totally, but I do want to ask Christian a question in terms of young people and young people who might be considering medicine as you are as a profession. Uh, what challenges do you see young people? And obviously, we are very interested in African Americans being in pursuit and entering the profession. What are the challenges that you see for young African Americans going into the field of medicine?
So over the course of my time as a student, I would say that I've known that I wanted to be a doctor for a very long time, but it almost seems like I'm on the path to retirement first. And this is mainly due to, I would mainly say, the financial barriers in terms of pursuing a career within medicine. And lots of my friends bring this up to me. And that's like the main problem within them not wanting to pursue a medical degree, I would say, is the financial issues.
Do you and your friends ever talk about this as a problem, or how do you get around it, or how do you confront it and do it anyway?
So in terms of confronting it, I would say that we don't have the conversations as much because they've already shifted their focus to their financial majors or to their computer science majors or to anything other than medicine. But with the students at my school, when I do talk about it with them, we're mostly in programs such as Chicago Scholars, Summer Posse Scholars, and we invest most of our time into trying to delve ourselves into these programs so they can pay for our undergraduate. And then from there, we work our way through scholarships to pay for medical school as well. I would say scholarships seems to be the only solution to this problem.
Thank you so much. Maybe one of the ways that we can look at visibility to lead to scholarships is to talk about what people of your generation have to offer to the solutions. I know, I don't know if you remember when COVID was happening, there was clearly a communication gap along the generations about when we moved to shelter in place and kind of what to do to protect our tribe, right? I think that gap was because we needed more intergenerational presence at the table making decisions. So if there's someone, what are your thoughts on kind of COVID, whether or not people are getting vaccinated or not, in ways that we can do better with communicating in an intergenerational, more inclusive manner this, as we move towards protecting our tribe this time?
Oh yeah. So in terms of communication within COVID, I feel like within my generation, uh, one of the main barriers in communication about things that important seems to be social media, and there's a lot of mess on social media that pushes over the facts that the youth need to hear. And I would say that one of the main barriers, yeah, is social media and people honestly not caring as much as they really should about the issues that affect our well-being in society today. Um, so yeah.
I'd like to comment a bit about the financial situation because I didn't hear you really talk about that very much. And are the barrier? What do you see are the major barriers in terms of are there no scholarships or nothing available to even apply for at the and I'll break it up into the undergraduate as well as the pre-graduate positioning.
So I would say that there are definitely routes in which you can go and programs that you can apply for, but just the general basis of medical school seems daunting to most African American students because they feel as though there aren't that many. But in within my research, I have found a deal of scholarships that are available, but it's also about getting into them and then the competitiveness of them, which is okay. But that is just a problem that may steer some people away from the field of medicine.
Is that because the requirements are very? I'm just trying to understand what the impediments are. Is there a lack of just a number of them, or is it that the requirements are too cumbersome, or I mean, because this isn't a new problem,
Right.
and I don't know whether or not people have made themselves aware of. There's still the program at the University of Illinois. There's some other places, and I'm not aware. And with the program that that I work with Dr. Whitaker on what's called CPAS, and that is creating pathways for academic student success. Some other things. I don't know. Are we not making that kind of information available, or is there nowhere that the students can go to get this information, or are the universities making are you looking in the universities for? Just tell me where we are and what we might need to do. We have Congressman Davis sitting right here, and he has been a real champion. I mean, part of the reason that I got through was because of the work that he did. And So we need to think about what those barriers are, quantify them, and then figure out what we can do. That's the only way it's going to get solved.
I would mainly say that there's a lack of access to them, and the universities don't promote these scholarships. So it's up to the student to find their own scholarships, which is completely okay. But even in them finding it, I believe that it is hard to find.
What is happening with the cost of medical education? Has it continued to rise over the past few years as well? I mean, I think those are the kinds of I mean, at one point in time, I remembered when I finished medical school and I'd gone away and I went back to school to I don't know to request some information to be sent on my behalf, and I was almost fell over because they posted the tuition, and I'd been gone for like 5 months, and when I saw the post, I mean, I almost fell over because of the rate of rise that was just overwhelming. That I couldn't understand how the cost of medical education within 6 months had more, was 4 times as much as it was during the 4 years that I was in med school. So I mean, so I don't know if that cost has continued to climb, which again create a barrier for students who don't have a lot of means to be able to meet those things. I don't know if that's a cause, that's a problem along with the lack of assistance. So if you're on both ends, if there's less assistance and higher cost, I mean, it's a very difficult steep hill to climb.
Yeah, I want to jump in and say a few things, if that's okay with Dr. Mike, Dr. 100.
Of course it is. Mm.
Well, yeah, and listening to the conversation, a couple of points I want to make. One, and it's from a personal standpoint. I worked my way through college because it was affordable. College is not affordable for most people in general. Junior colleges may be affordable, but 4-year institutions, the tuition has gone up unbelievably high. And so there is a challenge, and that's the financial challenge. I think that's one of the challenges Christian is talking about. But both Dr. Mason and I serve on the Urban Health Committee for the University of Illinois. And we look at the matriculation of students for all of the colleges of the health sciences through medical school, nursing school, allied health, dentistry, and we talk about that. And African American enrollment, particularly African male enrollment, is woefully low. And that's for 2 reasons. And I think it's important to keep in mind when you talk about scholarship, the first word is scholar. And you not only you can't apply for money and say, I need the money to go to school. You have to be able to demonstrate that you actually are capable of going to school and doing well. And that's not a large proportion of the population that we're talking about. Most of us need the money, and some of us who need the money also have what it takes to get through college, and medical education is rougher than some others. The other point that I want to make is we live in a world today where you can code, and if you're good at coding and computers and other things, you can make more money in less time than a doctor. Why would I want to go to medical school when I can get a technical skill and be in demand and travel and make the same money as a doctor? And I can make that money right now. So there are a lot of competing things going on in a student's mind, a young person's mind. And I don't know what decisions I would make if I was 17, 18, or 19 now about what I wanted to do moving forward, particularly knowing myself and the fact that I made a pledge to myself when I was 12 years old that I was moving out of the house as soon as I could. I was going to make some money. that I think that their focus would be other things. And I applaud Christian not only for what he's doing, but I applaud your parents, because your parents played a major role, not only in helping you get to where you are, but encouraging you and providing an environment that allowed you to be successful and to be at the point that you are in your life. And we have less of that going on now in a lot of homes on the south and west sides of Chicago.
Definitely. I'm a champ kid, urban health program, all of it were things that were accessible. Now we have CPAS, we have I Am Able, things like that. Have you heard of CPAS and I Am Able? I want a spot check.
No, I haven't.
No. Okay. So that tells me, and then initially when we were talking, your initial question was how is it had to do with that you said in our private chat, talked a lot about how are we in the medical industry keeping up with the advances in technology. You spoke about AI for a minute, but I think this leans into what opportunities we have to make these things more available. Leans into what we were talking about with COVID. If our young people are speaking social media, then we really need to think about our social media presence for CPAS and what we're doing. Well, I'm not on CPAS, but CPAS, I Am Able. I'm not actually not part of all of them, but always ready to volunteer and help with it. And some of the I do some separate things, which are the 530 Scholars Club. We work with people 7 to 17 to work on their make sure they're in the 5th percentile in reading and math, and score at least a 30 on the ACT or the equivalent for the SAT, which puts them in the running for scholarships. And so that's where I am. I'm a former Chicago public school teacher, and so that's where I operate. But we gear them up for programs like CPAS and to be involved. But the question is, what is that bridge? There are plenty of other ones that, and they're not coming to mind right now, but I do think it's something. As we look at it at 7:51, I do think that's something. How are we supporting our future doctors, our future scientists, things like that, and what we can do as far as social media? Christian, I'm going to ask Congressman Davis, Nikki, to send over kind of my information, and I'm sure if you want to reach out to I don't want to volunteer, Dr. Mason, but I do, because that's a person that's going to, like, you said you wanted to go. That's what you said. Guess what? Hook up with him. He'll be like, I thought you said you wanted to go until you go. That's one of the person that's going to make you, like, you going to follow up on what you saying it. And it's going to be a journey. Somebody to support you in all areas of the journey. And then we need to talk about and make an agenda item. One of the, for next week, what are we doing about increasing the social media presence? I'll take that on. I know Dr. Mason has also been a spearhead for another topic we talk about here that I'd like you to think about, Christian, if you have time, continuing to join us, how we as African Americans even think about, and it leans to what you were saying, our future quality of life. How much do we think we deserve? How much are we investing in ourselves up front, and how the system is set up to divert us from things like medical school, our goals and our dreams, and then what we do to navigate around that. And, Dr. Mason has taught us well. It starts when we're looking at little baby dolls and all that other stuff when we're young, training up, and how we infuse equity into that system. So just to wrap up what we talked about, I love that we talked about COVID-19, the new variant that's coming out. It's a derivative of Omicron, much like our parents had babies. It's a new derivative. Also, we talked about how mutations happen, right? Mutations, we had an opportunity to get that herd immunity to stop the virus. We unfortunately missed that opportunity. So what does the virus do? Try to Tetris itself and build parts and pieces so it survives for the long haul. That new variant is the Eris or the E5 variant. And we talked about what we can do. We talked about, in addition to that, so how do viruses work? 2 parts to every pandemic. What the virus wants to do and what we do as humans, right? So in our human body, things like cold, flu, RSV, those things cause inflammation. Diet, things we eat, Dr. Mason mentioned it, cause inflammation. Inflammation is when your body tries to fight off stuff, but it causes swelling. And we have barriers like our skin, like our gut, different things that form these tight bonds arm in arm. When inflammation happens, those bonds begin to go separate further and further. And what happens? Viruses like COVID, things like that, it's easier to get. So, what can we do to prevent? Right? We talked about get vaccinated against the flu, get vaccinated against pneumonia. The flu vaccine either is out at your local clinic or will be out by September. From September to March is the season where you get the flu vaccine. Pneumonia stays out, it stays ready, that vaccine. So those are preventive measures. Another preventive measure that we didn't get to is the studies are showing that when people's vitamin D level is adequate, right? And you would know that by going and getting a lab from your doctor, seeing if it's low, and then your doctor gives you this weekly supplement, and then you continue that by taking a vitamin D supplement every day. You can also eat foods that are like Dr. Mason, you have to help me, vegetables rich in vitamin D, things like that. That protects the tribe. Nikki's on mask over the nose, under the chin, and the hand washing. Don't forget to get the back of that thumb, everything like that. So we talked about preventive measures. We also talked about if you have asthma, diabetes, heart disease, lung problems, and if you're without housing, that puts you at greater risk to get this to be impacted by COVID previously and in the future. That is going to be my until next Monday. Remember those facts. Protect your tribe. I'm going to hand it off to Dr. Miller. What is your until next Monday?
Oh, the one thing that you left off is that age. Don't forget how
Yes.
old you are, because that
Yep.
is a risk factor. You can't change it, but you can certainly respond in a way that you protect yourself with that age, as opposed to not understanding the risk that you're at and understanding what you need to do. So make certain that you remember those factors. If you have chronic diseases, Dr. Maya talking about, if you're old, then actually, that keep changing in terms of what age you need to look at. But definitely, if you're older than 65,
Yep.
be careful about your environment, about how you come in contact with other folks, and protect yourself. I mean, I'm not saying to isolate yourself totally, but make certain that you protect yourself at all times.
All right. Until next Monday, Dr. Graham.
Well, I'm just going to add my diseases as well. If you've got lupus, you've got sarcoidosis, rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, psoriatic arthritis, your immune system is not going to be as good as handling that virus. And that's another reason why you need vaccination. And if you're taking medications to control these diseases, you'll be more vulnerable to the virus. Another reason to talk to your rheumatologist and find out how and when to change your medications so that vaccination is the most effective.
All right. Thank you so much. Until next Monday, Mr. Harrington. On mute.
I'm off mute now. I want to thank Christian for joining us tonight, and let him know that if he wants to talk to any of us offline, once we get off, and we can talk to him about our careers and how we got to where we are. Nikki has our phone number, so she can share our phone number, and we'd be more than happy to talk with you, give you advice, let you know how we got to be able to do what we're doing. I'm also thinking about something that Dr. 100 said about messages and messengers, and I talked about messengers and trusted messengers. Maybe it's the people that are delivering the message that people are not responding to, as opposed to the message. And maybe we need more like people like Christian out there,
Yep.
demonstrating and talking about what he's doing to help other young people see that they can do the same thing he is. So he is a model moving forward. So I want to applaud him for that. And I wore my James Baldwin T-shirt tonight. So mine for next week is my favorite James Baldwin quote: "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." That's my next Monday.
Come on, Miss Harrington, and facing the truth in medicine. The medicine that we learned in Western medicine and the medicine all around us. Until next Monday, Dr. Mason.
Well, I really want him to, share my information with him. I think that we need to make certain that things like CPAS, he's very familiar with if he's not already, because we got to use the resources that are out there. And we just had a conversation about making sure that we get our students and make certain that they're as ready as possible for the task above, that's going to come before them as they go start this journey into the medical profession. And so, as Joe mentioned, there are people out there, and the work of Congressman Davis goes on as he's worked with many schools, including the University of Illinois. And we've got to make certain that we create that continuation of that pipeline. It's critical, and because if we don't reproduce ourselves, nobody else will.
That's
I-
right.
So we've got to make that happen and look forward to it. You can get my information from them, and then from anybody there, and we'll make sure you get in touch. I'll make sure you get in touch with the folks at CPAS. You can Google it; it's online. You can just go to CPAS; it's all there. And if you have any problems, I'd be happy to work with you through it, because we got to use what we have. We may not have everything we need, but there are some things we do have that we can use, and we're not using them as effectively as we could. There was just an article that wasn't very favorable about education in the city of Chicago, about the word schools. And what we want to do is make sure that we find the students that can do this work, who want to do this work, and demonstrate how well they would do this work. So that's what I'm trying to do.
All right. And then I'd like to say hello to Bonnie Smedley, Virginia Knight, Audrey J. Cox, Linda Johnson, Connie Taylor, Marianne Jackson, Crystal Bennett Kyles, Lillian Frazier, Nellie Parnell King, Julietta Bolivar. Thank you for joining us. Christian, Mr. and future Dr. Katie Obi. Until next Monday.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a wonderful experience, and I want the community to focus on the outreach of financial and mentorship assistance to the youth who want to pursue a career in medicine.
Come on. All right. Nikki, thank you for joining us. Do you want me to hand it to the congressman, or are you going to give us until next Monday? Give a little spiel.
So, what I think would be great to do, since we're only 2 minutes out, is to let the congressman do as he does each and every Monday night, while he teaches us that true health is wealth, is to take us home. So, Congressman, take us home.
Well, till next Monday in between, we have our annual back to school picnic and parade on Saturday. And then everybody's welcome. And of course, health screenings and all those things will be done. But we also have on Sunday, somebody told me I was going to be 12 feet tall because the Safer Foundation is unveiling the likeness they've put on their building at Kedzie and Arthington. And it's going to be called the Danny Davis Training Center for people who are trying to turn their lives around. And so we invite everybody out to that Sunday afternoon. They just do outstanding work. And until next Monday, health really is wealth. And it's so fascinating because I understand that the young fellow who had a heart attack is now back playing professional football. Can you imagine that? That he, with the the Buffalo Bills, I think is the team that he plays with. And I think he played in his first game since then. And I even think they won. So health is indeed wealth. And we'll hope to see you next Monday. Thank you all.
Thank you.